meet the needs of business, and I look forward to it coming to the Select Committee.
Aaron Gilmore.
It has been an enormous pleasure to stand and speak on this bill, yet another plank in the National Government's economic reform package. One of the wonderful things about this bill, I want to firstly talk about, is there are a whole lot of particular examples in this bill which actually help small to medium businesses, large businesses, to reduce their costs, help employ more people and get our country growing again, Mr Speaker. I want to spend a fair bit of my time on one particular example that exists in this bill, and it's one that I'm very happy to see in this bill. My local video shop has had problems with the labels that go on its DVDs. And you'd think to yourself, well, what sort of problem would there be? Well, there's quite a large deaf community that surrounds that video store. And one of the particular issues that the people in that community have is the ability to see and read and access the labels that exist. Because the labels have had to go on the inside cover of the DVDs, because they've had to be affixed to rather than displayed upon. Now, one of the issues of this bill is actually in terms of allows some changes to the labelling that goes on your videos and your DVDs at your local video store. And I think that's a good thing, Mr Speaker. It's an example of the little extra costs that video store owner and many others up and down the country will no longer have to incur about double labelling, which takes time and effort, and actually is being a right utter pain, in his own words, for his own customers. These little changes in itself might not mean anything to maybe the people listening tonight, unless they are particularly affected by that change. A change in 2 or 3 small words in a bill can mean a massive reduction in cost to those people in that community. And I'm very pleased that I spoke to some of the people affected, and I told them about this particular change, and they were ecstatic. In fact, I actually had to calm them down and say I wasn't responsible for the change, Mr Speaker, but they promised me that they were very happy with the change and that they thought that was a wonderful move. Now, that particular change is one of a small clause in a bill which has a significant number of changes, and this is the second bill that's been brought before this House in terms of regulatory reform. Last year we spoke about some of the changes in the bill, and that related to the requirements to audit certain size companies' accounts. And one of the particular benefits of that change was saving about 10 to 15 million a year in terms of audit fees that would no longer be required for certain types of statutory accounts. And I'm pleased to report, Mr Speaker, that I've spoken to a number of leading audit firms up and down New Zealand, and sure enough, that's what's happened. The auditors' fees have dropped, the accountants are very grumpy, and the companies that pay their audit fees are very, very happy. And I think that's a wonderful thing, because that's money that can better be spent on employing people, innovating our businesses, and growing our economy overall. In particular, there's another example here that the prior speaker spoke about. That's about electronic filing and the receipt of documents. Now, to most people that seems an absolute given. You want to get a piece of paper or a bit of information. These days you go to the internet and you ask for it. Literally you put it into one of the various search engines and you find it. And you, as a result of that, you get sent things via email. Now, the stupidity of the historic nature of some of the details of the law meant that could not happen. And that's another example of some of the strangeness that exists in bits of regulation not keeping up with the way the economy has been progressing. And I think, Mr Speaker, that's a classic example of why a regulatory reform bill needs to be undertaken on an annual basis, because technology moves very, very quickly. Mr Foster in front of me has one of the new iPads that exists, a wonderful piece of technology, and I know he speaks very well of it and some of the applications that do exist. 3 years ago, such bits of technology would not exist, and the ability to access certain documents, if you're a shareholder, would be very difficult. And I know that Mr Foster and other people around the country would very much welcome the ability to access shareholder voting and other documents electronically rather than to have to get weighty bits of paper in the post, which costs, would estimate to cost in the order of millions of dollars. Now, those millions of dollars saved, Mr Speaker, will have the ability to be able to reinvest in those things that matter, training of people's skills, in terms of helping innovation, and in terms of employing people in many other forms. Mr Speaker, I actually think one of the other aspects that the Labour opposition have touched on that I actually want to talk about is the issue of the removal of the regulatory impact statement from the bill. Now, the regulatory impact statements is a classic example of regulatory reform in itself, Mr Speaker. Regulatory impact statements are publicly available, and they're available to anyone who wants to find them. The issue actually is, do they have to be attached to every single bill at every single time? Because that would mean every single bill would actually be longer and weightier, and not everybody wants to read the regulatory impact statement, but they are publicly available and they're easy to find for those people who are interested in them. Not every person is interested in reading those documents, but they are a useful document to read. Mr. Speaker, those are examples where reduced costs and administration do occur from a need to have a regulatory reform and an ongoing process that does exist. Mr. Speaker, I want to finally talk a little bit more about some of the actually other detailed issues that are here. We've heard from the prior speakers from my side talking about some of the crazy regulations that have existed and needed to be changed. And examples were given of particularly around offensive products in their mind that might be seen dangerous, such products as toilet duck and Persil surf. Now, those sort of products had the potential to be seen as dangerous and difficult. Now, in reality, all that really needed was some changing in terms of some of the rules and regulations around labelling, and that, Mr. Speaker, made some sense. But to take it to the far extent that the prior Labour-led government had, this seemed a little bit over the top and relate to a whole lot of costs and unnecessary cost incurred, and that didn't make a lot of sense at all. Mr. Speaker, this bill overall is about the impacts of reducing the red tape and the costs to businesses, particularly those small to medium businesses out there. I actually look forward to actually having these bills come forward every year, and every year be able to stand up and say, last year we make this change in regulation, and yes, this is what happened, and this is what happened to a certain nature of some businesses. I know that my family are involved in many small businesses, and every year they tell me they moan and groan about various bits of paper they have to fill in or bits of regulation they have to deal with. They are very unhappy about it, and I get it in the year every family birthday, wedding, Christmas, and every other occasion. And having 56 cousins, I get that quite a lot. Now, the reality actually is one of those things is those sort of changes every year will bring about some additional positive changes to reduce the costs to Kiwi businesses and have more money to help employ and innovate New Zealand. And I commend this bill to the House.